So I finished few more games since making the last video, believe it or not, so let's get right into it. A weird public journal entry of games I want to talk about but don't feel like making a full video on, Volume 2. Now let's start with a game I finished literally while making the previous video, but ended up being too lazy to actually include it. As I mentioned before, I finished Devil May Cry 2 earlier this year, and I hate it, just as pretty much everyone else was. Lackluster combat and level design, boring visuals, bland story, you know the drill at this point. So to fix the gross aftertaste it left in my mouth a bit, I also decided to finally finish the last remaining game in the series I haven't played yet. Devil May Cry, the original one, and I actually ended up liking it more than I expected to. Sure, the combat is simplistic compared to everything that came after it. It didn't age that well in its controls and camera, and the Devil May Cry charm the series is known for isn't quite there yet, but the hefty atmosphere and the satisfying feel of even that simplistic combat made me overall enjoy it. Now I understand why people want to see a full-blown remake of this game. There's no other entry like it in this series really, and while most of them easily beat it in every single aspect, it's something that's still worth revisiting. This weird blend of Resident Evil and a character action game. And after Devil May Cry, I felt like killing some more demons. Doom has one of the most satisfying combat loops I ever played. You watch Mark Brown, you know why the mechanic of beating hell out of demons instead of waiting for it to regenerate is amazing. But it's only one of the aspects of why this combat feels so damn good. Both your arsenal and the bestiary of enemies work together really well, each of them having their own specific behaviors, strategies and counters, constantly making you switch up your own tactics and priorities, never letting you rest, giving the combat hectic and intense feel. And that's not even mentioning the crisp presentation in every aspect. From the brutal, crunchy animations, detail of its models and locations, quality of its sound design or the iconic soundtrack, perfectly going along with the carnage on the screen. It's not perfect, first levels can feel kinda slow and repetitive because of their lower enemy and weapon variety, but they unfortunately have to be. They have to drip feed new weapons and enemies slowly to not overwhelm you. Ironically enough, Doom also sometimes relies on its combat way too much, and just throws you in an arena after an arena after an arena, instead of giving you a bit of a quiet time in its gorgeous atmospheric levels, meaning playing this game can sometimes be really exhausting. But there's nothing easier than taking a breather in the arcade or snap map levels and ripping again. After all that blood and gore and demon killing, I felt like I could use a change of mood to something lighter and less ripping limbs apart related, which actually ended up happening twice, in form of the excellent Shantae and the Pirate's Curse and Shantae Half-Genie Hero. Before playing these two games, Way Forward was that one studio that made a really fun, kinda short brew of puzzle platforms for me, but now I'm a full-on fan. It's kinda strange honestly, because while both games have platforming physics that feel kinda clumsy and heavy compared to some excellent games in the genre, and Metroidvania-like structure of returning to already finished levels and finding previously hidden parts of them may not suit everyone, this is still one of the best platformers I ever played. Because Shantae's main power is in its charm, in its humor and character, and I mean that. This is one of the few genuinely funny series of games I played, being strong enough to make me pull through the difficulty spikes and sometimes just make design. All of that doesn't mean that the actual platforming or level design is just straight up bad, by the way. Both games have decent variety in its locations and gimmicks, not even mentioning nice offering of side content and collectibles, all of that wrapped up in a really cute and vibrant art style and music. A Half-Genie Hero also offers a wide selection of alternative characters and modes, and if you can survive the fact that they have no unique levels on their own, there's plenty of fun hiding in that as well. I already talked about Beyond Good and Evil and how much I enjoyed it in its own video, so I can skip that one. But let's talk about another cult classic I really liked, Psychonauts, which also happens to be another game with tons of charm and only okay gameplay. Its platforming feels, again, clumsy and floaty. Its final stage is one of the worst things I ever seen, and locking areas behind a point of no return in a collectathon is just odd. But again, this is one of the few genuinely funny and charming games I ever played. It feels like you're put into a Pixar movie sometimes. What also helps is the way that okayish gameplay is framed and structured, as many of Psychonauts levels are genuinely really smart and creative in its themes and design. All of them are playing out in the heads of your teachers, friends and patients of an abandoned mental facility, creating a really unique device for environmental storytelling and gameplay scenarios. Whether you're directing a stage play, playing a strategy tabletop game or fighting in wrestling matches, this game never stops feeling fresh and surprising, and it absolutely made me interested in Psychonauts 2. Let's start doing micro reviews from now on, as there's still a lot of games to talk about and I really don't want this video to be too long. First of all, I finished several bit-sized, hour or less long experiences, games like Dear Esther, one of the first major walking sims, and even though there are games from that genre I did enjoy and I like story-heavy games in general, this was just kinda boring. It felt way too pretentious and dry for me to even remember it in any way whatsoever, which is not something I can say about Nephis Begins. Which, I'm still not sure if I actually played or it was just a fever dream. I played Knock, a really fun and cute puzzle game about figuring out how to get into boxes and what to do with them afterwards. I finished Say No More, which felt more like a surreal, slightly interactive 2-hour-long animated movie than an actual game, but it's also one of the weirdest animated movies I ever seen. Played. And finally, I kinda finished Everhood. By that I mean that I've seen the credits, and right now, I don't feel like I'm mentally in a place to continue. I can't tell you why exactly, but if you know, you know. Now for less micro reviews. I also finally finished Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, which, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of. And it's not necessarily the game's fault, at least not fully. Its platforming physics and mechanics just felt really stiff and simplistic compared to the more modern platformers I'm used to, and many of the levels were just annoying for a variety of reasons, from obnoxious gimmicks to awful controls of those gimmicks, which were issues that got kinda fixed just in the third entry with its more complex movement abilities and level design, but it was already a bit too late at that point. And to make it even worse, I don't like its presentation either. Don't take me wrong, it's visually pretty, with vibrant colors and tons of detail within its animation and levels, but I also find its characters and general tone obnoxious, which obviously made me disinterested in getting used to the controls even more. It's just not for me, that's all that it boils down to sometimes. On the other hand, I can't complain about any of that in Theory and The Will of the Wisps, which is an amazing sequel. Buttery smooth movement and platforming, gorgeous world to explore, surprisingly touching story and combat that actually feels like combat, meaning that my Metroidvania awakening continues strong. It has few annoying difficulty spikes and a few ideas it just takes straight from Hollow Knight felt kinda funny, but I still hope we eventually get an Ori trilogy. I explored Tomb Raider Legends, which was a really solid adventure game I was able to beat literally in one day. I'm actually a fan of the modern Survivor trilogy, and even though this was obviously a very different game compared to those, I really enjoyed its level design, platforming elements, and its neat summer blockbuster atmosphere. Puzzles were kinda boring, combat and especially boss fights were very meh, and the PC port is not the best, but I'm planning to look into other two entries of the trilogy next year. Then I finished Warhammer 40k Space Marine, and while the franchise is still just something interesting hiding behind the tabletop and no core series to follow for me, it presented the giant battles the universe is known for well enough to make me slightly more interesting. Like, this is an intense third-person shooter with great pacing and a focus on excellent mini-combat released during the cover shooter era. It's a shame it flew under the radar and we're getting a sequel just now. Then I also finished my first David Cage game, Fahrenheit, which I'm very mixed on. It's super atmospheric with its snowy New York streets and a tense plot where you're playing as a murderer and the detectives who are trying to catch him at the same time. And I generally tend to enjoy these on-the-rails movie-like games, but it also took itself way too seriously. When your plot twist is a main shaman possessing you to make you kill people, and then you proceed to have a flying fist fight with him that looks like this, without a hint of irony, you know there's something special happening here. Also, David Cage is a fucking weirdo. I also finished Resident Evil 0, but it's also a game I might talk about more later in its own video. Just note that it has some of the best and worst things I've seen in a Resident Evil game. Now, let's talk about two flawed but still really good RPGs I finished, Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines and Dragon Age 2, and I feel like I need to explain all of those a bit more. Both are flawed for different reasons. Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines is a super atmospheric game with excellent plot, side content, universe, and a lackluster combat system, with floaty, buggy melee combat and awful gunplay. Dragon Age 2 has fun and fluid combat, with a lot of neat abilities and party members with their own unique skill trees, but it also has a mech story that feels unpolished and just like a collection of several short stories. Both games also happen to be rushed and possibly unfinished, so that's a fun coincidence. I knew what I was getting into with Masquerade. Brief praise and criticism I just gave it is the general public opinion on it really, but I was surprised that I didn't hate Dragon Age. I love Origins and I'm currently playing through and enjoying Inquisition, and I always heard that Dragon Age 2 is the bad one in this series, but in the end it's just different. Origins was an epic fantasy journey that introduced and then thoroughly explored a brand new universe, taking you across its different races, locations and factions, all while giving you your own character that could impact and make its mark onto this world. Dragon Age 2 is more personal and much smaller scale story, taking place in only one city and mainly focusing on its already set main character. It has its good moments and there's nothing within that story I would call downright bad, but it just doesn't really compare to what came before. The companions are all great and interesting, DLCs are fun, the plot has great pacing, combat is intense and there's a lot of stuff to experiment with in it. It's just not a good sequel. It is a good game, but apart from the combat, it doesn't really improve anything. It just makes it different and feels more like a spin-off really, which is just not enough, and I understand the disappointment on its release. I still didn't like it as much as Masquerade, as that's a broken, amazing game par excellence, but if you haven't played Dragon Age 2 yet because of what you've been told about it, please give it a try, you might be pleasantly surprised. Last category of games I want to talk about are cool off games. Games where I can just turn my brain off, put on a podcast, album or a YouTube video and relax after the more focused experiences. Games like Company of Heroes 2, an excellent RTS in which I also finished and almost finished both of its main campaigns respectively, but I spent way more time in the challenge Theater of War missions or the intense skirmish matches. I play Need for Speed Rivals and the 2015 Need for Speed remake when I feel like racing, and while both games are flawed in many ways, from their mission variety to the actual driving physics, Rivals' core gameplay loop is addictive enough and Need for Speed's atmosphere is strong enough to make me like both of these in the end. I still play one of my favorite time-consuming games, Warframe, and even though I'm currently stuck not at 1, not at 2, but at 3 obnoxious, super grindy quests, Warframe still has one of the most smoothest and complex combat systems out of any game I ever played, not even mentioning its almost absurd content offering in its sheer scale and variety, so I'll just grind my teeth and push through. But because I'm not okay, I recently added another 2 big, time-devouring games, Final Fantasy XIV and Genshin Impact, and I'm enjoying them a lot so far. Both have very warm and welcoming vibes in everything, from their stories to their visuals to their UIs, combined with an addictive combat systems and slowly expanding offering of content. But they just give me the same warm fuzzy feeling, and with that, very similar reasons for why I'm continuing to play them. That's all the cool of games I'm occasionally playing. And I also plan to return to Stardew Valley, Monster Hunter World or one of the roguelikes that already took way too much of my time, but that's for a different video. I started this year with a list of 30 games I want to finish. 30 games that have been sitting in my library for way too long. My frustration growing enough for me to decide to deal with them this way. And now, 7 months later, only 6 games remain. Dragon Age Inquisition, Hollow Knight, Sleeping Dogs, Final Fantasy X, Yakuza 3 and Bloodstained. I already started most of them, and I can already tell the rest of my gaming year is going to be very solid. Inquisition is a huge, detailed RPG with an addictive combat system. Final Fantasy X has comfy summer vibes for days. Sleeping Dogs is an actually enjoyable open world game. Hollow Knight and Bloodstained are competing for the title of the best Metroidvania I ever played, and Yakuza 3... Actually, I still need to start Yakuza 3, but I know I will like it, it's Yakuza. I will probably make a third games I finished this year so far as well, focus specifically on those titles. As for my plans before that, I might do a video of this type for movies I've seen this year, as that's quite a large amount as well, or make another webtoon video. Apart from that, there's 1 or 2 games I would like to look at more thoroughly instead of these rapid fire bit-sized reviews, but I'll see about that. I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and in case you did, please consider liking, sharing or even subscribing, it would help this channel a lot. My name is Bate, thank you for watching, take care and I'll see you soon.